The blood-soaked letter trembled in Josephine Summers' hands as the sheriff and his deputies stormed through her cabin door, their accusatory eyes already condemning her for the death of her husband, whose body lay sprawled on the floor of their modest home outside Tucson, Arizona Territory, 1878. Josephine Summers, "You're under arrest for the murder of Charles Summers," Sheriff Wilson declared, his voice like gravel as two deputies grabbed her arms, causing the letter to flutter to the floor, landing in the pool of her husband's blood. "No, please, I didn't," Josephine struggled against their grip, her honey-brown hair falling from its pins as she desperately tried to explain. "Someone else was here. Someone save your lies for the judge," the sheriff interrupted, nodding to his men who roughly bound her wrists with coarse rope. "Charles was shot with your rifle, and you're the only one here." Tears streamed down Josephine's face as she was dragged past her husband's body, the man she had married 3 years prior when she was just 20. The gunshot wound in his chest had stopped bleeding, his eyes still open in permanent shock. Josephine's heart raced with grief and panic as the truth became clear. She was being framed for a murder she didn't commit, and there wasn't a soul in Tucson who would believe her innocence. What the sheriff and his men didn't know was that someone had witnessed what truly happened that afternoon. A lone cowboy passing by who had seen a masked rider flee from the back of the cabin mere minutes before Josephine's screams alerted the neighbors. A cowboy whose testimony could save her life, if only he would come forward. As the deputies shoved Josephine into the back of the wagon, her tear-stained face turned toward the distant hills where the witness had disappeared, her only hope riding away with each passing moment. Several miles outside town, Adam Everett removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow. At 32, he had spent more than half his life on horseback, driving cattle across the Arizona Territory, and he knew trouble when he saw it. What he had witnessed at the Summers cabin troubled him deeply, but getting involved with the law wasn't something any sensible cowboy did without good reason. Adam had been tracking strays from the Rockingham Ranch, where he worked when he'd heard the gunshot. Curiosity, or perhaps fate, had drawn him closer to the modest cabin, where he'd seen a figure dressed in black racing away on horseback. Moments later, he'd heard the woman's screams. He had hidden himself behind a stand of mesquite trees, watching as the woman Josephine, he'd later learn her name was, had discovered her husband's body. He'd been about to approach, to offer help, when neighbors appeared, followed quickly by the sheriff. The rapid progression of events had kept him silent, observing as accusations flew, and the young woman was arrested for a murder Adam knew she hadn't committed. Now, as he made camp for the night, the woman's desperate face haunted him. Adam stared into his small campfire, the flames dancing as he considered his options. Getting involved meant delaying his return to the ranch, possibly losing his job. It meant standing against the town's authorities, making himself a target. Yet leaving an innocent woman to hang wasn't something his conscience would allow. "Damn it all," he muttered, tossing another stick into the fire. By morning, he'd made his decision. Josephine spent her first night in the Tucson jail cell curled on a thin, straw mattress that reeked of previous occupants. The small window high above let in slivers of moonlight that did little to dispel the darkness. Her wrists were raw from the ropes, and her eyes burned from crying. She had been questioned for hours, the sheriff and the prosecutor seemingly deaf to her protestations of innocence. "Mrs. Summers," the prosecutor had said with false sympathy, "your husband's blood was on your hands, literally. Your rifle fired the fatal shot. And several neighbors reported hearing you argue with Charles earlier that day. We disagreed about selling some land," Josephine had replied, her voice hoarse. "That doesn't mean I killed him." The evidence suggests otherwise, the sheriff had added. And frankly, a young, pretty widow stands to inherit everything. It's not the first time we've seen this story. Now, in the stillness of her cell, Josephine closed her eyes and tried to make sense of the nightmare her life had become. Charles hadn't been a perfect husband. He was often distant, sometimes cruel with his words, but she had never wanted him dead. Their marriage had been one of convenience rather than passion, arranged by her father to secure her future after he'd fallen ill. Charles had been nearly 15 years her senior, a successful rancher with good standing in the community. Her father had died believing he'd secured his daughter's future. What no one knew was that Charles had been acting strangely in recent weeks, receiving mysterious letters, disappearing for hours without explanation. Just yesterday, he had told her he needed to speak with her about an urgent matter, but he'd never had the chance before the bullet took his life. Sleep eluded her as she listened to the night sounds of tocsin distant piano music from the saloon, occasional shouts, the guard's footsteps as he made his rounds. Tomorrow, she would face the judge for a preliminary hearing. Without a witness or evidence to support her claim of innocence, she knew what the outcome would be. Dawn broke with the jangling of keys as the jail door opened. Josephine sat up, expecting the guard with her breakfast, but instead found a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. Mrs. Summers? The man's voice was deep, touched with a hint of Texas. He stepped forward, revealing a weather-worn face beneath a battered hat. His eyes, blue as a summer sky, regarded her with cautious assessment. "My name is Adam Everett. I believe I might be able to help you." Josephine rose to her feet, hope fluttering in her chest for the first time since the nightmare began. "Help me? How?" "I saw what happened at your cabin yesterday," Adam said, lowering his voice as he glanced toward the door where the guard had momentarily disappeared. "Or at least I saw enough to know you didn't shoot your husband." Tears sprang to Josephine's eyes. You saw the person who did it?" Adam nodded, his expression grave. "I saw someone leaving your property right after I heard the shot, riding fast like the devil himself was in pursuit." "Did you see their face?" Josephine asked, gripping the iron bars of her cell. "No, madam. They were masked and dressed all in black," Adam admitted. "But I know it wasn't you, and I'm willing to testify to that." Before Josephine could express her gratitude, the guard returned, accompanied by Sheriff Wilson. "What's your business with my prisoner, Cowboy?" The sheriff's hand rested on his holstered revolver, his stance confrontational. Adam turned, squaring his shoulders. "The name's Adam Everett, Sheriff. I work for the Rockingham Ranch, and I've come to provide testimony regarding what happened at the Summers place yesterday." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly do you think you saw?" "I saw someone fleeing the scene right after the shooting. It wasn't Mrs. Summers." Adam's voice was steady, his gaze unflinching. Sheriff Wilson's expression darkened. "That's mighty convenient testimony, Mr. Everett. You realize making false statements to interfere with justice is a crime." "I'm aware, Sheriff." "I'm also aware that hanging an innocent woman is a crime in the eyes of God, if not always in the eyes of territorial law." The tension between the men was palpable as Josephine watched, hardly daring to breathe. Finally, the sheriff sighed. "The judge is arriving on the noon stage. You can tell your story to him." Sheriff Wilson turned to leave, then paused. "In the meantime, I suggest you keep your distance from my prisoner. Wouldn't want anyone to think you're developing a personal interest in this case." After the sheriff and guard departed, Adam turned back to Josephine. "Don't lose hope, Mrs. Summers. I'll do everything I can to help clear your name." "Why?" Josephine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. Why risk yourself for a stranger?" Adam considered her question, his eyes reflecting something deeper than simple altruism. "Because I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing. I've seen innocent men hang because witnesses stayed silent." He paused. "And because no one should have to face injustice alone." As he turned to leave, Josephine called after him, "Mr. Everett, thank you." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Josephine with the first glimmer of hope since her world had collapsed. The courthouse in Tucson was packed for Josephine's hearing. Word had spread quickly about the murder and the mysterious cowboy witness who had appeared to defend the accused widow. Townspeople filled the wooden benches, their whispers creating a constant undercurrent of sound. Judge Harrison Blackwell, a stern man with a reputation for harsh sentencing, presided over the hearing. The territorial prosecutor, Edwin Morton, presented the case against Josephine with damning confidence. "Your Honor, the facts are clear," Morton declared, gesturing toward Josephine, who sat beside her court-appointed lawyer, a nervous young man named Peter Collins who seemed overwhelmed by the proceedings. Charles Summers was shot once through the heart with a rifle belonging to the defendant. Her fingerprints were on the weapon. She was alone with the victim at the time of his death, and multiple witnesses can attest to recent arguments between the couple. Judge Blackwell peered over his spectacles. "And the motive, Mr. Morton?" "Money, Your Honor, as it so often is." Upon Charles Summers' death, his entire estate, which is considerable, passes to his widow. Additionally, Morton paused for effect, "we have reason to believe Mrs. Summers may have formed an attachment to another man." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Josephine's head snapped up in shock. "That's a lie," she exclaimed, earning a stern rap of the judge's gavel. "Mrs. Summers will restrain herself," Judge Blackwell warned. "Mr. Collins, control your client or I'll have her removed." Peter Collins cleared his throat. "Your Honor, these are baseless accusations. The prosecution has provided no evidence of any impropriety on my client's part. We have statements from neighbors who observed Mrs. Summers speaking intimately with an unknown man on several occasions," Morton countered. "My brother," Josephine burst out, unable to contain herself. "They saw me with my brother who visited from California last month." Judge Blackwell's gavel came down hard. "One more outburst, Mrs. Summers, and you'll be held in contempt. Mr. Collins, present your defense." The young lawyer stood, adjusting his spectacles nervously. "Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Adam Everett to the stand." Adam walked down the center aisle, his spurs jingling softly with each step. He had exchanged his trail clothes for a clean shirt and vest, though he still looked every inch the cowboy with his sun-bronzed skin and calloused hands. He took the oath and sat in the witness chair, his posture straight as he faced the crowded room. "Mr. Everett," Collins began, "please tell the court where you were on the afternoon of June 15th, when Charles Summers was killed." Adam's voice carried clearly through the courtroom. "I was tracking strays about a quarter-mile from the Summers property when I heard a gunshot. Being naturally curious, I rode closer to investigate. That's when I saw someone leaving the cabin in a hurry." "And did you recognize this person?" "No, sir. They were dressed in black, wearing a mask. Riding a dark horse, moving fast away from the property." Morton rose from his seat. "Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is conveniently vague and impossible to verify." "I'm not finished," Adam stated firmly before the judge could respond. "After the rider left, I moved closer and heard Mrs. Summers scream. I watched as she discovered her husband. She was clearly shocked and distraught. There's no way she could have fired the shot and then acted so convincingly surprised." Judge Blackwell leaned forward. "Mr. Everett, why didn't you come forward immediately with this information?" Adam's expression remained steady. "I was going to approach and help Mrs. Summers, But by then the neighbors had arrived, followed quickly by the sheriff who seemed to have already decided she was guilty. I needed time to consider the consequences of getting involved. And what changed your mind? Adam's gaze moved briefly to Josephine before returning to the judge. My conscience, Your Honor. I couldn't let an innocent woman hang for something she didn't do. Morton approached the witness stand, his expression predatory. Mr. Everett, have you ever met Mrs. Summers before yesterday's unfortunate events? No, sir. And yet you're willing to risk perjury for a woman you've never met. Morton's skepticism was evident. I'm not risking perjury, Mr. Morton. I'm telling the truth. How convenient that you're the only witness to this mysterious rider. No one else saw this person entering or leaving the Summers property. The Summers place is isolated, as you know, Adam replied evenly, and I can't speak to what others did or didn't see. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with Morton trying to discredit Adam's testimony and suggest he had ulterior motives. Through it all, Adam remained composed, his story unwavering. Finally, Judge Blackwell called for a recess to consider the evidence. As the courtroom emptied, Josephine caught Adam's eye across the room, her gratitude evident in her tearful smile. For a brief moment, something passed between them, a connection deeper than words could express. Then the guards escorted her back to her cell to await the judge's decision. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Adam found himself cornered by Sheriff Wilson and Prosecutor Morton. That was quite a performance, Everett, Morton said, his voice low. But we both know what you're doing. I'm telling the truth, Adam replied calmly. Something you might want to try. Sheriff Wilson stepped closer. Listen, Cowboy, I don't know what your game is, but interfering with justice in my town is a dangerous business. Is that a threat, Sheriff? Adam's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, though he wore no gun in the courthouse. Consider it friendly advice, Wilson replied. Mrs. Summers is going to hang for what she did. Your testimony might delay things, but it won't change the outcome. Save yourself the trouble and ride out while you can. Adam stood his ground. I'm not going anywhere until justice is served. The real killer is still out there, and instead of threatening me, you should be looking for them. Morton laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. You cowboys and your notions of frontier justice. This isn't some dime novel, Everett. The evidence against Mrs. Summers is overwhelming. Evidence can be misleading, Adam countered. And sometimes, Mr. Morton, the simplest explanation isn't the right one. The men parted ways with tension simmering between them. As Adam walked toward the saloon to await the judge's decision, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd made dangerous enemies. But the image of Josephine's hopeful face stayed with him, strengthening his resolve. 2 hours later, the courtroom reconvened. Judge Blackwell's expression gave nothing away as he took his seat. Having considered the evidence and testimony presented today, the judge began, I find that there is sufficient doubt regarding Mrs. Summers' guilt to warrant a full trial. However, given the seriousness of the charge and the nature of the evidence, bail is denied. Mrs. Summers will remain in custody until her trial, which I am scheduling for 2 weeks from today. Relief and disappointment battled on Josephine's face. While she had avoided immediate conviction, she still faced weeks in jail and the possibility of a death sentence if the trial went against her. As the court adjourned, Adam made his way toward Josephine, who was speaking quietly with her lawyer. Mr. Collins, Adam said, interrupting their conversation, I'd like to help with Mrs. Summers' defense. The young lawyer blinked in surprise. That's commendable, Mr. Everett, but I'm not sure what more you can do beyond your testimony. I can find the real killer, Adam said simply. Give me the 2 weeks before the trial. I'll track down whoever did this. Josephine looked up at him, hope warring with doubt in her eyes. Why would you do this? You've already risked enough for me. Adam held her gaze. Because I know what I saw, Mrs. Summers, and because I believe in justice. You'll need help, Collins said, warming to the idea. The sheriff certainly won't assist you. I'll manage, Adam replied, but I'll need to know more about your husband, Mrs. Summers, his business, his enemies, anything that might point to why someone wanted him dead. Josephine nodded slowly. Charles kept many things from me, but I'll tell you everything I know. She hesitated. Be careful, Mr. Everett. I wouldn't want another death on my conscience. As the guard led Josephine away, Adam found himself watching her retreating figure, struck by her quiet dignity despite her circumstances. Something about Josephine Summers had gotten under his skin, and it wasn't just the injustice of her situation. There was a strength in her that called to him, a resilience that matched his own, but he pushed those thoughts aside. Finding the truth and clearing her name had to be his focus now. Romance had no place in a murder investigation, especially not with a recently widowed woman whose life hung in the balance. The next morning, Adam began his investigation at the Summers cabin. The sheriff had posted a deputy to guard the property, but Adam managed to convince the young man to let him examine the scene. Sheriff Wilson won't like this, the deputy warned as he unlocked the door. Sheriff Wilson doesn't have to know, Adam replied, slipping the man a silver dollar. The cabin's interior was much as it had been the day of the murder, though Charles Summers' body had been removed. A dark bloodstain marred the wooden floor near the center of the main room. Bookshelves lined one wall, a writing desk positioned beneath the window. On the opposite side stood a kitchen area with a cast iron stove and a simple wooden table with 2 chairs. Adam moved methodically through the space, searching for anything that might shed light on why someone would want Charles Summers dead. In the bedroom, he found a locked strongbox beneath the bed. Using his knife, he carefully worked the simple lock until it clicked open. Inside were documents, land deeds, bank statements, and a stack of letters. Adam quickly sorted through them, his attention caught by a recent correspondence from a mining company based in Silver City. Dear Mr. Summers, the letter read, regarding your inquiry about the silver deposits on your property, our geologist confirms significant potential value. As discussed, our offer of $10,000 stands. Please consider carefully, as others have expressed interest in these claims. Adam folded the letter and continued his search. In the writing desk, he discovered a hidden compartment containing a small leather journal. Charles Summers' personal diary revealed a man deeply involved in land speculation, with frequent mentions of a partnership that had soured in recent months. Preston threatens exposure. One entry from May read, claims he has documents proving fraud. Must resolve situation before Josephine discovers the truth. The name Preston appeared multiple times, always in connection with business dealings that seemed increasingly desperate and possibly illegal. Adam pocketed the journal, his mind working through the implications. Charles Summers had secrets worth killing for. As Adam prepared to leave, something caught his eye, a glint of metal beneath the edge of the rug near the front door. Kneeling, he found a brass button, ornate and distinctive, bearing the insignia of the territorial bank. Not a common cowboy's button, but one from a banker's jacket or a businessman's waistcoat. Adam slipped the button into his pocket just as the deputy called from outside. Better wrap it up in there. Sheriff's making his round soon. Armed with new information, Adam headed to town to speak with Josephine. The jail was quiet when he arrived, the midday heat keeping most people indoors. The guard, recognizing Adam from the hearing, allowed him to see the prisoner. Josephine looked paler than before, the stress of her confinement evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. Still, she smiled when she saw him, her face lighting up in a way that made Adam's heart beat faster. "Mr. Everett, I was hoping you'd come," she said, rising from her cot. "Have you discovered anything?" Adam showed her the button and the journal, explaining what he had found. Josephine's expression shifted from hope to confusion as she examined the items. "I don't recognize this button," she said, "and I never knew Charles kept a journal. He was always private about his business affairs." "You know anyone named Preston?" Adam asked. "The journal mentions him repeatedly as a business partner." Josephine's brow furrowed in concentration. "Preston? Yes, I believe Charles mentioned a Marcus Preston once or twice. A banker or investor from Phoenix, I think. They had some land deals together. The journal suggests they had a falling out. Preston was threatening to expose something possibly fraud." "Charles involved in fraud?" Josephine looked genuinely shocked. "I knew little about his business, but he always presented himself as scrupulously honest." "Men aren't always what they seem, Mrs. Summers," Adam said gently, "especially when there's money involved." Josephine sighed, returning the journal. "I'm learning that lesson too late, it seems." She met his eyes directly. "Mr. Everett, Adam, why are you doing this? Truly, you're risking so much for a stranger." Adam hesitated, uncertain how to answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself why Josephine's fate mattered so much to him. He had seen injustice before and hadn't always intervened. But something about her called to something in him, a sense of rightness, of purpose he hadn't felt in years. "I believe in doing what's right," he said finally, "and helping you feels right." A blush colored Josephine's cheeks as she lowered her gaze. "I'm grateful, more than I can express." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Wilson, who regarded Adam with undisguised hostility. "Visiting hours are over, Everett," he said sharply. "And I heard you've been poking around the crime scene. That's interfering with an investigation." "Just helping Mrs. Summers' lawyer gather evidence for her defense," Adam replied evenly. "I believe that's her right." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You're on dangerous ground, Cowboy. I'd advise you to mind your own business and leave law enforcement to those who wear a badge." "I'll keep that in mind, Sheriff." Adam tipped his hat to Josephine. "I'll return tomorrow, Mrs. Summers." Outside the jail, Adam considered his next move. If Marcus Preston was involved in Charles Summers' death, he needed to find the man. But first, he needed to learn more about the land deals mentioned in the journal. The Territorial Land Office would have records of all property transactions, and the mining company letter provided a solid lead. As Adam walked toward the land office, he felt eyes on him. Glancing over his shoulder, he spotted one of Sheriff Wilson's deputies following at a distance, making no effort to conceal his surveillance. The sheriff was clearly concerned about Adam's investigation, which only strengthened his determination to continue. The land office clerk was initially reluctant to share information, but the combination of Adam's friendly manner and a small bribe loosened his tongue. Charles Summers, it turned out, had been involved in a series of increasingly large land purchases over the past year, focusing on properties south of Tucson. "Most folks thought he was crazy," the clerk explained. "That land's practically worthless, too dry for farming, no good grazing for cattle." "Unless there's something valuable beneath the surface," Adam suggested. The clerk's eyebrows rose. "Like silver. There were rumors, but nothing confirmed. Old man Barton tried mining there back in '70, came up empty." "Maybe Summers knew something Barton didn't," Adam mused. "What about Marcus Preston? Was he involved in these purchases?" "Preston," the clerk frowned. "Name sounds familiar. Let me check the records." After several minutes of searching through dusty ledgers, the clerk found what he was looking for. "Here it is." Marcus Preston, representing the Arizona Investment Company, partnered with Charles Summers on 6 land transactions between January and April of this year. Substantial investments, too. Adam leaned forward to examine the records. Any address for Preston or this company? Phoenix office is listed here, the clerk said, pointing to an entry. But word is, Preston's been in Tucson recently, staying at the Grand Hotel, I believe. Thanking the clerk, Adam headed for the Grand Hotel, a 3-story building that stood as the most impressive structure in Tucson. The hotel clerk confirmed that Marcus Preston was indeed a guest, though he was currently out. "Expected back for dinner, sir," the young man informed Adam. "Would you like to leave a message?" "No, thank you," Adam replied, deciding it would be better to observe Preston first rather than alert him to his interest. Adam spent the next few hours visiting the saloons and shops near the hotel, casually asking about Preston. The picture that emerged was of a well-dressed, smooth-talking businessman who had arrived in Tucson about a week before Charles Summers' murder. Preston had been seen meeting with several local businessmen, including the manager of the Territorial Bank. As evening approached, Adam positioned himself in the hotel lobby, pretending to read a newspaper while watching the entrance. Shortly after 7, a man matching Preston's description entered, tall, well-dressed in an expensive suit, with a carefully trimmed beard and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wealth and influence. What caught Adam's attention immediately was the man's waistcoat, dark blue with brass buttons, identical to the one he had found in the Summers cabin. As Preston crossed the lobby toward the dining room, Adam folded his newspaper and followed at a discreet distance. Preston dined alone, consuming his meal with the deliberate precision of a man who appreciated fine things. Adam observed from a corner table, nursing a whiskey and planning his next move. Direct confrontation seemed unwise, but he needed to find a way to connect Preston to the murder. His opportunity came when Preston finished his meal and headed for the hotel bar. As the businessman settled into a chair and ordered a brandy, Adam approached, adopting the manner of a curious fellow traveler. "Evening," Adam said, tipping his hat. "Mind if I join you?" "Not often I get to enjoy the company of someone from the business world." Name's Adam Everett, cattle driver for the Rockingham. Preston regarded him with mild suspicion before his features settled into a practiced smile. "Marcus Preston, please have a seat." Adam signaled for another whiskey, then settled into the chair opposite Preston. "Appreciate it. Been a long day in the saddle. I hear you're involved in land investment. Must be more comfortable than chasing steers across the territory." Preston chuckled, relaxing slightly. "It has its own challenges, but yes, I prefer negotiating deals to wrestling cattle. Are you interested in investments, Mr. Everett? You don't strike me as the typical investor." "Just curious," Adam replied with an easy smile. "My boss has been talking about expanding, buying more land. Can't help wondering if there's money to be made in property around these parts." "There's always money to be made if you know where to look," Preston said, swirling his brandy. "Though recent events have complicated some of my ventures here." "Recent events?" Adam asked innocently. "You mean the murder everyone's talking about?" Preston's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Charles Summers. Yes, unfortunate business. We had some dealings together." "I heard they arrested his widow," Adam continued, watching Preston closely. "Seems a bit neat to me." "The law knows its business," Preston said dismissively. "Though I understand there's some cowboy claiming he saw something that day." Adam kept his expression neutral. "That's so. First I've heard of it." Preston's eyes narrowed slightly. "You haven't been in town long, have you, Mr. Everett?" "Just passing through," Adam lied smoothly. looking to relax before heading back to the ranch. Their conversation continued, with Adam carefully steering topics to reveal more about Preston's business while avoiding any hint that he suspected the man's involvement in the murder. By the time they parted ways, Adam had learned that Preston would be leaving for Phoenix the following evening, information that added urgency to his investigation. Back in his rented room at a modest boarding house, Adam reviewed what he knew. Preston had been in business with Charles Summers. Their partnership had soured, with Preston threatening to expose fraud. Preston had been in Summers' cabin recently enough to lose a button there, and now he was preparing to leave town just as questions about the murder were increasing. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to warrant closer scrutiny. Adam decided to search Preston's room while the businessman attended to his affairs the next day. It was risky, illegal, even, but Josephine's life depended on finding concrete evidence before the trial. Morning found Adam watching the hotel from a bench across the street. Preston emerged shortly after 9, dressed impeccably and carrying a leather portfolio. Once the businessman had disappeared around the corner, Adam entered the hotel and made his way to the second floor where the clerk had mentioned Preston's room was located. Using skills acquired during less respectable periods of his life, Adam picked the lock and slipped inside. The room was meticulously organized, reflecting its occupant's precise nature. Adam began a careful search, conscious of the need to leave everything as he found it. In a valise half-packed for travel, he discovered a bundle of papers, correspondence between Preston and Charles Summers, detailing their land investments. The most recent letters revealed a scheme to artificially inflate the value of their properties by spreading rumors of silver deposits, then selling to Eastern investors at enormous profit. Charles, one letter read, "Your reluctance to proceed is understandable but untimely. We are committed now, and withdrawal means ruin for us both. The assayer has been paid for his favorable report. Reconsider your position, or I will be forced to take measures to protect my interests." The letter was dated just 3 days before the murder. Adam continued searching, finding a locked cash box beneath the bed. Breaking it open, he discovered a small leather pouch containing raw silver ore samples, presumably to show potential investors, and a loaded revolver. The final piece of evidence came from Preston's coat pocket: a train ticket to Phoenix for that evening, and an onwards connection to San Francisco. Adam was carefully replacing the items when he heard voices in the hallway, Preston's distinctive tone recognizable among them. He froze, then quickly gathered the most incriminating letters and slipped toward the window. The voices grew louder, stopping outside the door as a key turned in the lock. With no time to escape unseen, Adam concealed himself behind the heavy curtains just as Preston entered, accompanied by another man. "I assure you, Mr. Thornton, the investment is sound," Preston was saying. "The unfortunate business with Summers doesn't affect the value of the properties." "Yet you're leaving town rather suddenly," the other man, presumably Thornton, replied. "Makes a man wonder if there's something you're not telling me." "Purely coincidental timing," Preston said smoothly. "My business in San Francisco cannot be delayed. But I'd be happy to postpone my departure if you're prepared to sign the agreement today." Their discussion continued, focusing on the land deal. From his hiding place, Adam listened as Preston spun an elaborate web of half-truths and outright lies about the silver deposits. Finally, Thornton agreed to consider the offer overnight, and the men parted ways. After Thornton's departure, Preston remained in the room, shuffling papers at the desk. Adam remained motionless behind the curtain, scarcely breathing. Just when he thought Preston might settle in for the afternoon, the businessman checked his pocket watch and muttered about an appointment. Moments later, he left the room, locking the door behind him. Adam waited several heartbeats before emerging from his hiding place. He needed to get the evidence to Collins and then confront Preston before he could flee town. As he reached for the door handle, a new thought struck him. What if Preston had planned to frame Josephine all along? The timing of his departure, the neat way everything pointed to her guilt, it seemed increasingly deliberate. With renewed urgency, Adam slipped from the room and made his way to Peter Collins' small law office near the courthouse. The young lawyer was startled by Adam's sudden appearance and even more surprised by the evidence presented. "This is remarkable," Collins said, examining the letters. "It establishes clear motive for Preston to want Summers dead, especially if Summers was threatening to expose their fraud." "Can you get a warrant for Preston's arrest?" Adam asked. Collins frowned. "With Sheriff Wilson so convinced of Mrs. Summers' guilt, unlikely. And these documents, while suggestive, don't prove Preston pulled the trigger." "Then we need to make Preston confess," Adam said grimly. "He's leaving town tonight. We're running out of time." "A confession extracted under duress wouldn't be admissible," Collins warned. "I'm not planning to beat it out of him," Adam clarified. "But if we confront him with this evidence, let him know his scheme is exposed, he might try to run. That would look like an admission of guilt to any reasonable person." Collins considered this. "It could work, but we'll need witnesses, respected citizens who can testify to what they see and hear." "Can you arrange that?" Adam asked. "Get a few trustworthy men to be present when we confront Preston." "I can try," Collins said. "Judge Blackwell himself might be persuaded. He's known for his commitment to justice, despite his stern reputation." "Good." "We'll confront Preston at the train station just before his departure," Adam decided. "He'll be focused on escape, less guarded." As Collins set out to gather their witnesses, Adam returned to the jail to update Josephine. He found her pacing her cell, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Adam." "I was beginning to worry," she said, moving to the bars that separated them. He explained what he had discovered, watching hope bloom in her eyes as he detailed the evidence against Preston. "So it was business," she murmured. "All this time I wondered if Charles had a personal enemy, someone who hated him enough to kill. But it was just about money." "Money drives men to desperate acts," Adam said. "Your husband was threatening to expose their fraud. Preston couldn't allow that." Josephine reached through the bars to grasp his hand, her touch sending an unexpected warmth through him. "You've done what seemed impossible. How can I ever repay you?" Adam found himself holding her hand longer than propriety allowed, drawn by the gratitude and something deeper in her eyes. "Seeing justice done is payment enough." She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "You're a rare man, Adam Everett." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Wilson, his expression thunderous as he spotted their clasped hands. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he remarked coldly. "I had my suspicions about your interest in this case, Everett. Seems I was right." Adam released Josephine's hand and faced the sheriff. "I'm interested in justice, Sheriff. Something seems in short supply around here." "Watch yourself," Wilson warned. "Interfering with my prisoner, possibly tampering with evidence you're asking for a cell of your own." "Actually, Sheriff," Adam replied, "I've been gathering evidence that points to the real killer. Evidence you might have found if you hadn't been so quick to arrest Mrs. Summers." The sheriff's face reddened. "You're overstepping, Cowboy. Whatever amateur investigation you think you're conducting ends now." "It ends when Mrs. Summers is free," Adam countered, "and I believe that will be very soon." As Adam turned to leave, the sheriff called after him. "I know what you're planning with Collins. Preston came to me, told me all about your harassment, Try anything at the train station and I'll arrest you on the spot." Adam paused, then continued walking without reply. Preston's warning to the sheriff complicated matters, but didn't change the plan. If anything, it confirmed that the businessman felt threatened by their investigation. By 7 that evening, Adam had positioned himself at the train station along with Collins and 3 respected townsmen, including Judge Blackwell, who had been persuaded to witness the confrontation. The Phoenix-bound train was due to depart at 7:30, and Preston would likely arrive soon to claim his seat. Sheriff Wilson was also present, standing near the ticket office with a deputy, watching Adam with open hostility. "Remember," Collins murmured to their group, "we need clear statements from Preston that suggest his guilt. Questions about the silver fraud, about his threats to Summers. Anything that establishes his presence at the cabin that day." Judge Blackwell nodded gravely. "I shall listen most carefully, Mr. Collins. If there is evidence of this man's guilt, I want to hear it." At 7:20, Marcus Preston appeared, carrying a small valise and walking briskly toward the waiting train. Adam moved to intercept him, with Collins and the others close behind. "Preston," Adam called, "a word before you leave." Preston halted, his expression shifting from surprise to controlled anger when he recognized Adam. "Mr. Everett, I'm afraid I have a train to catch." "I think San Francisco can wait," Adam replied, closing the distance between them. "We need to discuss Charles Summers." Preston's eyes darted to the men accompanying Adam, lingering on Judge Blackwell, whose presence clearly unsettled him. "I've already told the sheriff everything I know about that unfortunate incident." "Have you told him about your fraudulent land scheme?" Adam asked, his voice pitched to carry to those nearby. "Or about threatening Summers when he wanted to back out?" Preston's face paled slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Collins stepped forward, producing one of the letters Adam had taken from Preston's room. "Your own words, Mr. Preston. Quite damning when read in light of recent events." Sheriff Wilson approached, his hand on his gun. "What's going on here?" "Justice, Sheriff," Judge Blackwell answered before anyone else could speak. "These gentlemen have brought some concerning evidence to light regarding Mr. Preston's involvement in Charles Summers' death." Preston's composure cracked. "This is absurd. They broke into my room, stole private correspondence. Sheriff, I want this man arrested." "Is that an admission that these letters are yours?" Collins asked quickly. "Letters threatening the murdered man just days before his death. Business disagreements," Preston snapped. "Nothing more." "And the silver ore samples," Adam pressed. "The ones you're using to defraud investors about worthless land. Summers was going to expose you, wasn't he? You couldn't allow that." Preston's hand moved toward his coat, but Adam was faster, grabbing the man's wrist. "I wouldn't," he warned. "The revolver in your pocket won't help your situation." A crowd had gathered now, drawn by the confrontation. Preston looked around wildly, seeing judgment in the faces surrounding him. The train whistle blew, announcing imminent departure. "This is harassment," Preston declared, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "I had nothing to do with Summers' death." "Then you won't mind explaining why your button was found at the murder scene?" Adam asked, producing the brass button from his pocket. "Or why you're fleeing town just as questions about the murder are being raised?" Preston's gaze locked on the button, recognition and fear flashing across his face before he could mask it. That momentary reaction was all Judge Blackwell needed. "Sheriff Wilson," the judge said firmly, "I believe there is sufficient cause to detain Mr. Preston for questioning regarding Charles Summers' murder." "But Judge," Wilson protested, "we already have the killer in custody." "Based on circumstantial evidence that now appears to implicate another party," the judge replied. "Do your duty, Sheriff, or I'll find someone who will." Faced with the judge's authority and the watchful eyes of the crowd, Sheriff Wilson had no choice. With visible reluctance, he moved to arrest Preston. "Marcus Preston, you're detained for questioning in the matter of Charles Summers' death," he announced grudgingly. As the sheriff led Preston away, the businessman turned to Adam with venomous hatred. "This isn't over, Cowboy. You've made a powerful enemy today." Adam watched them go, aware that they had won only the first skirmish in what might be a longer battle. Preston had money and connections. He would not confess easily nor go to trial without a fight. Judge Blackwell placed a hand on Adam's shoulder. "Well done, young man. I'll arrange for Mrs. Summers' release in the morning, pending further investigation. It seems I may have been too hasty in my initial judgment." Collins was beaming, already planning the legal strategy to clear Josephine completely. "We'll need sworn statements from all witnesses," he said excitedly, "and a thorough examination of Preston's financial dealings with Summers." As the others discussed next steps, Adam found himself looking toward the jail where Josephine waited, unaware that her ordeal was nearly over. The thought of telling her, of seeing relief and joy replace the worry that had shadowed her eyes, filled him with a satisfaction deeper than any he had known before. The morning sun streamed through the small window of Josephine's cell as she prepared for another day of confinement. The sound of keys jangling in the lock drew her attention, and she looked up to see Sheriff Wilson, his expression sour, accompanied by Peter Collins, whose face bore a triumphant smile. "Mrs. Summers," Collins announced, "you're being released. The charges against you have been suspended pending investigation of another suspect." Josephine stared in disbelief. "What? How?" "Your cowboy friend," the sheriff said grudgingly. "He and Collins confronted Marcus Preston last night. Preston's being held for questioning in your husband's murder. Judge Blackwell has ordered your release on your own recognizance," Collins added. "You're free to go home, though you can't leave the territory until the matter is fully resolved." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes as the full impact of the news hit her. "Where is Adam? I want to thank him." "Waiting outside," Collins said with a knowing smile. "He's been there since dawn." Sheriff Wilson unlocked the cell door, stepping aside with poor grace. "Your personal effects are at the desk. Sign for them before you leave." Josephine walked from the cell with her head high, aware of the sheriff's lingering resentment but too filled with gratitude and relief to care. After reclaiming her few possessions and signing the necessary papers, she stepped outside into the bright Arizona morning. Adam stood beside his horse, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. When he saw her emerge, he removed his hat, a smile spreading across his weathered face. Josephine found herself running toward him, propriety forgotten in the joy of freedom and the overwhelming gratitude she felt. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. "You saved my life," she whispered, tears soaking into his shirt. Adam's arms encircled her, strong and steady. "You're safe now," he murmured into her hair. "Preston won't hurt anyone else." Josephine pulled back slightly to look up at him, suddenly aware of their public embrace but unable to make herself care about appearances. "How did you do it?" "Collins said you confronted Preston." Adam nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's a long story. One I'd be happy to tell you over a proper meal. You must be hungry after jail food." "Starving," she admitted with a small laugh, wiping away her tears. "But first I need to go home. To see." She trailed off, the reality of returning to the cabin where Charles had died striking her anew. Adam seemed to understand without words. "I'll take you," he said gently. "You don't have to face it alone." The ride to the Summers cabin was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Josephine found comfort in Adam's solid presence beside her. his steady hands on the reins of the wagon he had borrowed for her comfort. When they arrived, Josephine hesitated before the closed door, memories of her last moments there flooding back. Charles on the floor, blood pooling, the sheriff's accusing eyes. Adam stood silently beside her, offering strength without pressure. Finally, she took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The bloodstain remained on the floor, a dark reminder of violence that had shattered her world. Yet somehow, with Adam beside her, the cabin seemed less haunted, more a place she might reclaim. "I can help you clean," Adam offered, understanding in his eyes. Josephine nodded gratefully. "Yes, I'd like that." Together they scrubbed the floor, removed the signs of the sheriff's investigation, and opened windows to let fresh air circulate through the rooms. As they worked, Josephine told Adam about her life with Charles, their arranged marriage, his distance, the loneliness she had endured. "I didn't love him," she admitted as they sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee after their labor. "Not romantically. I respected him, tried to be a good wife. But there was always something between us, a wall I couldn't breach." "Now we know why," Adam said. "He was living a double life, involved in fraud, keeping secrets." "Yes," Josephine sighed. "I wonder if I ever knew him at all." Adam reached across the table, hesitating before covering her hand with his. "What will you do now? The ranch is yours." "I don't know," she confessed. "I never wanted to be a rancher's wife, to be honest. Before my father arranged the marriage, I dreamed of opening a dress shop. I've always had a talent for sewing." "It's not too late for that dream," Adam said. "Once this is all settled, you could sell the ranch, start fresh." Josephine turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "And you, what dreams are you chasing, Adam Everett?" He smiled, a touch of sadness in his eyes. "Never gave much thought to dreams. Been drifting from ranch to ranch since I was 16, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." "No family?" she asked softly. "Lost my parents young." "Raised by an uncle who taught me cattle work, then sent me on my way when I was old enough." He shrugged. "The trail's been my home since then." They talked through the afternoon, sharing stories, discovering connections neither had expected. As the sun began to set, Adam reluctantly rose to leave. "I should get back to town," he said. "Still need to give my statement to Judge Blackwell about everything I found in Preston's room." Josephine walked him to the door, suddenly afraid to be alone in the cabin. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he promised, his eyes warm as they met hers. On impulse, Josephine stood on tiptoe and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you, Adam, for everything." He touched the spot where her lips had been, a look of wonder crossing his face. "Sleep well, Josephine," he murmured, then turned and walked to his waiting horse. Josephine watched until he disappeared from view, her heart lighter than it had been in years despite the circumstances. For the first time since her father's death, she felt truly seen, truly valued. And though she knew it was too soon, too complicated to name the feeling growing between them, she allowed herself to hope. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal proceedings and revelations. Marcus Preston, faced with mounting evidence, eventually confessed to killing Charles Summers, though he claimed it was self-defense during an argument about their business dealings. The confession came after the territorial marshal discovered that Preston had attempted to bribe his way out of jail, lending further credence to his guilt. Throughout the proceedings, Adam remained by Josephine's side, a steady presence as the details of her husband's secret life emerged. Charles had been involved in multiple fraudulent schemes, using borrowed money and false promises to maintain an appearance of prosperity. His ranch, it turned out, was deeply mortgaged, the land far less valuable than he had claimed. I'm afraid you'll inherit debts rather than assets, Collins told Josephine during a meeting at his office. It doesn't matter, she replied, surprising herself with how little the news affected her. I never wanted wealth, just a life of my own making. Adam, who had accompanied her to the meeting, spoke up. The silver deposits on the southern property are real, though. I had an independent assayer check the samples. Not as rich as Preston claimed, but enough to clear the debts if properly developed. Collins looked impressed. That's excellent news, Mrs. Summers. You may come out of this difficult situation on solid financial ground after all. As they left the lawyer's office, Josephine turned to Adam, curiosity in her eyes. You had the silver verified. When did you do that? Been busy, he admitted with a smile. Wanted to make sure you had options, whatever you decided to do. The care and consideration behind his actions touched her deeply. Over the past weeks, their connection had grown stronger, though both had been careful to maintain propriety given the circumstances. Josephine was, after all, still in mourning by social standards, and Adam was conscious of the whispers that already circulated about his interest in the recent widow. Yet despite their caution, feelings had blossomed between them, evident in shared glances, lingering touches, and conversations that stretched late into the evening as they sat on the porch of her cabin. The day Marcus Preston was formally charged with the murder of Charles Summers marked a turning point. Judge Blackwell officially dismissed all charges against Josephine, publicly acknowledging the miscarriage of justice that had occurred. The town of Tucson, which had been quick to condemn her, now offered awkward apologies and invitations, seeking to mend relations with the vindicated widow. That evening, Adam and Josephine celebrated her complete exoneration with a quiet dinner at her cabin. She had prepared a special meal, using skills rarely employed during her marriage to Charles, who had preferred simple fare. "This is magnificent," Adam declared, savoring a bite of apple pie. "You've been hiding talents, Josephine." She laughed, the sound free and unrestrained. "My mother taught me to cook before she passed, said the way to manage a household was through the kitchen." "Wise woman," Adam replied, his eyes warm as they rested on her face. "She'd be proud of how you've handled everything." Josephine set down her fork, suddenly serious. "I've been thinking about what happens next. The ranch will sell easily now that the silver deposit is confirmed. I could open that dress shop I mentioned, maybe in Tucson or even Phoenix." "Sounds like you've made plans," Adam said, something careful in his tone. "Not definite ones," she replied, watching him closely. "I find I'm reluctant to make decisions without knowing your thoughts." Adam set down his own fork, his expression shifting to one of vulnerable honesty. "My thoughts have been with you, Josephine, only you for weeks now, and after." She asked softly, "When everything is settled and there's no mystery to solve, no damsel to rescue," he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I've been offered a position managing the Rockingham. Foreman's retiring. Owner thinks I'd be a good replacement. It would mean staying in one place, building something permanent." Hope fluttered in Josephine's chest. "You'd take it." "Been considering it," Adam admitted. "More seriously since I met you." He hesitated, then continued. "I know it's too soon to speak of certain things. You're just free of one marriage, still in mourning by society's reckoning. But I want you to know that I see a future for myself here, if there might be a place for me in your future as well." Tears sprang to Josephine's eyes, not of sorrow but of unexpected joy. "Society's reckoning doesn't know that my marriage ended long before Charles died," she said. "I've mourned the relationship we never had, but I won't pretend to a grief I don't feel, not with you." Adam rose from his chair, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. Standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, he spoke with quiet intensity. I love you, Josephine. I think I began falling the moment I saw you in that jail cell, holding yourself with dignity despite everything. I've never met anyone with your strength, your grace under fire. Adam, she whispered, her free hand coming up to touch his face. I love you too. It happened so gradually and yet so completely that I can't pinpoint when my gratitude became something deeper, something I've never felt before. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, but Josephine rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, a question and answer exchanged without words. When they parted, both were smiling, the connection between them stronger than ever. We'll need time, Adam said, his forehead resting against hers. Time for the town's memory to fade for propriety's sake if nothing else. Yes, Josephine agreed, but not too much time. Life is shorter than we imagine, as I've learned too well. The months that followed brought changes to both their lives. Josephine sold the ranch to an eastern mining company, using part of the proceeds to purchase a small building on Tucson's Main Street where she opened Summer Fashions, a dress shop that quickly gained popularity for its elegant designs and reasonable prices. Adam took the position at the Rocking M, proving himself a capable and respected foreman. He courted Josephine openly but respectfully, mindful of her recent widowhood but unwilling to hide his intentions. Together, they weathered the occasional disapproving glance or whispered comment, secure in the knowledge of what they had experienced together and the truth of their feelings. On a crisp October day, 1 year after the events that had brought them together, Adam led Josephine to a small rise overlooking the valley where the Rocking M cattle grazed. A blanket was spread beneath a solitary oak tree, a picnic basket waiting. "You've planned something special," Josephine observed, smiling as Adam helped her settle on the blanket. "Special day deserves special treatment," he replied, opening the basket to reveal her favorite foods and a bottle of champagne. 1 year ago today, I made the best decision of my life when I decided to help a certain accused murderess." Josephine laughed, the sound carrying on the autumn breeze. "My hero, though I prefer to think of myself as a wrongfully accused businesswoman now." "A very successful one," Adam agreed, pouring the champagne into 2 glasses. "Your shop is the talk of the territory. I heard the governor's wife made a special trip to order a dress last month." "She did," Josephine confirmed, accepting her glass. "I've had to hire 2 assistants to keep up with the orders." She sipped the champagne, eyeing him over the rim. "But I suspect you didn't bring me up here just to discuss my business success." Adam set aside his own glass, suddenly serious. "No, I didn't." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Josephine Summers, this past year has been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to have a home, a purpose beyond the next horizon." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I know there might still be talk, that some might think it too soon, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Josephine's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, the man who had saved her life, who had seen her strength when others saw only suspicion, who had become her dearest friend and deepest love. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through her tears. "Yes, Adam Everett. I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the joy and promise of their shared future. Their wedding took place the following spring in the garden of the home they had purchased together on the outskirts of Tucson, close enough for Josephine to manage her thriving business, yet with enough land for Adam to keep a few horses and enjoy the open spaces he'd always loved. The ceremony was small but joyful. attended by friends who had stood by them through difficult times. Judge Blackwell, who had come to respect both of them deeply, performed the service, his usually stern countenance softened by genuine pleasure at uniting the couple whose story had captured his judicial interest, and then his personal admiration. "I never expected to find happiness again," Josephine said as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, "especially not emerging from such darkness." Adam held her close, his eyes reflecting the love that had grown steadily between them. "Sometimes the brightest light comes after the deepest shadow," he replied. "I spent years drifting, never knowing I was looking for you all along." As the years passed, their life together flourished. Josephine's dress shop expanded to a second location in Phoenix, managed by her talented assistant while she oversaw the original Tucson store. Adam continued at the Rockingham until the owner, impressed by his management skills, offered him a partnership. In their third year of marriage, they welcomed a son, William Charles Everett, named in part to honor the past they had both transcended. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, Elizabeth Rose, with her mother's honey-brown hair and her father's sky-blue eyes. The children grew surrounded by love, and the story of their parents' unusual beginning a tale told with honesty but appropriate gentleness as they matured enough to understand. "Your father is the bravest man I've ever known," Josephine would tell them. "He stood up for truth when it would have been easier to ride away. And your mother," Adam would add, "taught me that strength isn't about physical power, but about facing life's worst moments with grace and emerging even stronger." On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Adam surprised Josephine with a special gift, a journal bound in soft leather, its pages filled with his recollections of their journey from that fateful day to the present. "I never want to forget a moment of our story," he explained as she turned the pages, tears gathering in her eyes. "Even the difficult parts, because they led us here." Josephine closed the journal and leaned across the table to kiss him, as much in love as the day they married. "Who would have thought that being accused of murder would lead to the greatest happiness of my life?" Adam took her hand, his thumb brushing over the wedding ring he had placed there years before. "I knew you were innocent the moment I saw you in that cell," he said. "What I didn't know was that witnessing that one moment of truth would change everything for both of us." "For the better," Josephine added softly. "For the better," Adam agreed, his eyes reflecting the depth of his love for the woman who had transformed a drifting cowboy into a man with roots, purpose, and a heart full of joy. "And I wouldn't change a single step of the journey that brought us home." In the years that followed, their family thrived. William grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's practicality with his mother's artistic eye, eventually studying architecture in Boston, before returning to help develop Tucson's expanding downtown. Elizabeth, spirited and independent, showed an aptitude for business that mirrored her mother's, working alongside Josephine in the dress shop while nurturing dreams of her own clothing designs. The scandal that had once threatened to define Josephine's life faded into distant memory, replaced by her reputation as a successful businesswoman and devoted mother. Adam, too, earned respect throughout the territory for his fair dealings and honest work, eventually purchasing a controlling interest in the Rockingham when the original owner retired to California. Together, they watched Tucson grow from a frontier town into a proper city, maintaining their home on the outskirts where they could enjoy the peace of the desert while remaining connected to the community they had helped build. Marcus Preston served 15 years for the murder of Charles Summers before being released, a broken man who left the territory, never to return. The silver mine on the former Summers property produced modestly for nearly a decade before being depleted, providing jobs and prosperity that helped Tucson weather the economic challenges facing many Western towns in the changing times. On warm evenings, Adam and Josephine often sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in hues of gold and purple. Sometimes they spoke of the past, but more often they discussed the future, their children's prospects, business opportunities, community projects they supported together. "You ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't decided to help me that day?" Josephine asked on one such evening, her head resting on Adam's shoulder as they watched the stars emerge. "No," he answered without hesitation, "because there was no other choice I could have made and still lived with myself afterward." She smiled, taking his hand in hers. "I've always wondered if it was fate or chance that put you near our cabin that day." "Bit of both, maybe," Adam mused. "The strays I was tracking led me there, but something made me stay, made me watch instead of riding away." "Guardian angel," Josephine suggested. Adam laughed softly. "If so, it was watching over both of us." He turned to kiss her temple. "Found my purpose that day, though I didn't know it yet." They fell silent, comfortable in the understanding that had deepened over their years together, that life's most important turns often come disguised as challenges, and that love, once found, was worth defending against any odds. As their children grew and began families of their own, Adam and Josephine remained the steady center, their home a gathering place for holidays and celebrations. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold, gaining the polish of beloved history with each passing year. "Grandma wasn't really going to be hanged, was she?" their eldest granddaughter once asked during a Thanksgiving gathering, her young face serious as she processed the tale. "No, sweetheart," Adam had answered, winking at Josephine across the table. "Because your grandpa was the only one who knew the truth, and he made sure everyone else learned it too." "That's what love does," Josephine added gently. "It stands for truth, even when it's difficult." In the twilight of their lives, as Tucson entered the new century with electric lights and automobiles gradually replacing gas lamps and horses, Adam and Josephine watched the world change around them while their devotion to each other remained constant. Their life together, born in crisis and nurtured through decades of shared joys and sorrows, stood as testament to the power of truth, courage, and love's ability to transform even the darkest circumstances into pathways to unexpected happiness. And on quiet nights, they still spoke of that fateful day in 1878 when a gunshot brought them together, marveling at how what had seemed like the end of Josephine's life had instead been just the beginning of their story, a story of justice sought and found, of love discovered in unlikely circumstances, and of a truth that had set them both free to build a life neither could have imagined before their paths crossed on the frontier of the Arizona Territory.